Listen to understand, listen for their emotional state and their capacity and readiness to be able to move forward. If you skip this step, you are guessing at the starting point. And this happens so often. You think you know where someone is and you don't because you didn't ask questions. Hi, and welcome back to Reflect Forward. I'm your host, Kerry Siggins, and I'm so glad you are here today. We often hear the phrase meet people where they are, and we say it as if it's obvious or as if we even understand what it means. But in practice, most leaders don't actually meet people where they are, especially when they are struggling with a performance issue or having a challenge, whether personal or professional. They're just not showing up the way that we expect them to. And so often we either lower the bar or we get frustrated when they do not rise to meet our expectations. And I like to equate this to a GPS because when we are trying to figure people out, it's less like following a map and more like using a GPS. You do not start from where you wish somebody was, like, okay, I want to get to this point on the map. You start from their actual location where the GPS says that they are. And so, this is the issue that we leaders face when we say we need to meet people where they are, which in many cases we do, because when we do meet people where they are, we can help them get through a tough time. We can help them overcome a performance challenge. But we have to fully see somebody's reality, what they are seeing, how they're perceiving the situation, their performance, their issue, their emotional situation, whatever is going on through their own lens without colluding with it, without saying, yes, it's okay that you are showing up and behaving this way or have this a performance issue or whatever is going on. And if you lean too far into compassion, you might lose the ability to hold someone accountable. And if you lean too far into accountability, you could lose trust because people say, oh, gosh, she just does not understand the situation. She just doesn't understand how I'm feeling, what I'm thinking, what is going on. And so the driving question of today's episode of Reflect Forward is, what does meet people where they are actually look like in practice? Because we as leaders have to meet people where they are if we want to lead effectively. If we don't, we risk losing trust. We risk damaging relationships because we can hold people to these expectations. They need to rise to the occasion. And I do have a podcast episode on verbalizing expectations because unspoken expectations is such a dangerous thing. So I'll put that in the show notes, but we want people to rise to these expectations that we have, and we are disappointed when they don't. And there is a communication gap and an understanding gap of what those expectations are on really both sides. When we talk about meeting someone where they are, it is about finding compassion and accountability and melding the two together. And that's what I want to talk about today. So before we get started, let's actually create a definition for what it means to meet someone where they are, because a lot of times we say it, but we might not actually understand what that means. To me, meeting someone where they are shows that you understand that person's current reality without judgment or without projection. It means that you understand their emotional state, their capacity, their capability, their skill level, their mindset, and what they can actually hear and act on right now, depending on the situation. It is not where you think that they should be, it is where they actually are. So, what is meeting someone where they are not? It is not agreement. Just because you meet somebody where they are does not mean you have to agree with their viewpoint on the situation or accept that it is an acceptable place to be. It is not excusing behavior. It is not lowering the standard. And most importantly, because we all make this mistake, because the golden rule is treat others how you want to be treated. But that is a mistake because sometimes people don't want to be treated the way that you want to be treated. For example, let's say when you are going through something hard, you like to verbally process. And let's say the person who is struggling in the moment that you are trying to meet them where they are is a person who needs time to process. And so if you treat them the way that you would want to be treated and sit down and say, okay, let's talk this out, but they're the kind of person who says, I need to be able to go home and sleep on this and process and then come back, then you are not meeting them where they are because you are treating them the way that you want to be. So you really need to understand how people are showing up in those situations and what they really need. And the most important thing to remember is that this takes a commitment to build relationships. Being a leader is built on relationships. It is built on trust. You have to have those things if you want to be an effective leader. And so to meet someone where they are means that you have to take the time to understand where they are and understand who they are so that you can treat them the way that they want to be treated in the situation, not the way that you want to be treated in a similar situation. When you meet someone where they are, you have a much higher chance of getting an accurate diagnosis of the situation before you take action. So, again, going back to the GPS metaphor, if your GPS has the wrong starting point, every direction after that is wrong. So, taking the time to understand what is happening, getting an accurate diagnosis of the situation means that both of you can be at that same starting point. But here's the thing, most leaders skip this part. They skip diagnosing the situation and go straight into correction or advice or expectation. And that is where the gap between meeting someone where they are and trying to resolve the situation exists. That gap is a diagnosis. What is actually going on? And you need to be able to understand that before you go into correction, advice, or expectation setting. And because we are human, we project our own lens. We see the world through our view and we assume that the other person sees it the same way. But guess what? They don't. And so we think we are meeting people where they are, but we are actually meeting them where we are. And that is a huge mistake that leaders make. So it's so important to take the time to diagnose the situation, to understand what's going on, and to understand what that person is experiencing and what they need to help them effectively get through the situation. And this is important because the reality is that we are dealing with people as leaders, and we are people too. And we all go through challenges. We all have times where we're not performing our best, when something happens and we need course correction and support. When we as leaders are trying to help people through these situations, it's really important that we are taking the time to understand what is happening so that we can get people back on track. And that is our job, right? To inspire people to be their best, to remember their potential. And when someone is struggling, if you don't help them remember their potential by understanding where that starting point is, where they are on the map and the GPS, then you're going to risk breaking down trust and you're going to risk missing each other. And that isn't effective leadership. So, I would like to invite you to think about a situation in your life right now, preferably something going on in your leadership journey, but this could be personal too. And put this situation in your mind's eye, somebody who you are struggling with, or somebody who is struggling on your team or in your life, and you need to do a better job of meeting them where they are. So, ask yourself these questions. Is the way I'm approaching this about adapting to this person, or is it about seeing them clearly so I can lead them more effectively? And where is the line between honoring someone's reality, because their experience is their reality, and holding them accountable? And when you answer these questions honestly, you can analyze whether you are leading for comfort or you are leading for growth. And we as leaders need to help people grow. And so if the answer is I'm leading for comfort because I am just trying to adapt to this person and make the situation go away, or make this person feel good, or minimize it so we can just move on, or not deal with it because I don't like to deal with emotional situations, then you're leading for comfort. And leading for growth means you lean into the discomfort and you help this person through whatever situation they're going through. Not doing it for them, because that is not your responsibility. But as a leader, we are responsible for offering advice, support, course correction, guidance, expectations for our employees, whether they are struggling or not. So let's talk a little bit about where leaders get this wrong, because there are two particular failure modes that you might see yourself in. So you have someone who is struggling, who needs help, has this performance issue, whatever the situation that you are imagining right now. And there are two ways that you can approach this. You can approach this with over accommodation, where you perhaps soften your expectations, where you delay hard conversations, or you don't create accountability, or even where you create entitlement, where the person is expecting something. Or you can go into over projection, where you expect them to respond like you would, which is my problem. You move too fast, which is also my problem. Or you create pressure or disconnection. I have found myself operating in both of these modes, and it depends on the situation. And honestly, it depends on the person. And so you might say, oh, I usually fall into over accommodation or I fall into over projection. But the reality is that most of us will go somewhere in between these two, depending on, again, the person and the situation. So, I'm going to give you an example. I had someone on my team who was really going through something personal. It was a big struggle. He was in a bad place and it was affecting his performance. And I had to talk to him about it. And my initial reaction was, God, if he just were like me, he would do it this way. I had these internal expectations. This is how I would handle it. And then the situation would be over with and we could move on. But the realization that I had as I was navigating the situation is that I was asking this person to meet me where I was at. I was not meeting him where he was at. I entered the wrong starting point because I was starting where I was. And so the directions were all wrong. And he felt misunderstood and he was really annoyed with me because he was said, well, that's great, that's how you see it, but that's not how I see it. And that's great that that's how you would solve it, but that doesn't make sense for me. And so we were both frustrated because I was like, this is not that difficult of a situation, and he felt like I wasn't hearing him and really understanding. So because I started at the wrong starting point, the directions weren't working. Why isn't this working? Well, we were at two different places on the map. But here's the nuance in this. And I should have said this earlier in the podcast as I was talking about the golden rule and how we should treat people the way they want to be treated. In this moment, it was not appropriate to treat him how he wanted to be treated, because how he wanted to be treated at that time was he wanted validation. He wanted me to make him feel like he was appropriate in his emotional response. What he actually needed from me was to lead him in a way that he could actually receive what I was saying, actually receive my help, my course correction, and my expectations. And so that is the fine nuance here. It's not always just about giving people what they think that they want, right? Because then we enable behavior. It's about leading them in a way that they can actually be led, where they can receive your leadership. It's more about seeing where they are clearly, but not staying there. You do not always need to lead people based on their preferences. You need to lead them based on what will help them grow, delivered in a way they can hear. Empathy is required in this situation, but it is not an endpoint. It is an input to better leadership. The real skill in this moment is calibration. It is adjusting your timing, your tone, and your approach without lowering the standard. The destination does not change, right? Helping the person get through this situation so they can get back to performing good, but the route might change. What am I trying to say here? Let me just summarize this. It's important for you to understand what people need, how they like to be communicated with, and understand that they need to be heard and seen. And then you need to ask yourself, okay, how do I lead this person in a way that is going to be effective? And that can be, I absolutely hear what you're saying. I understand that this is difficult, and I would like to find a solution to be able to move forward that works for both of us. What would that look like? That is a way for you to see them clearly, but not stay stuck in that moment. That is what I'm talking about. So let's use this GPS metaphor to walk through the steps of how you would do this. So, step one is you get curious and you locate that starting point. You cannot diagnose a situation without curiosity. You have to ask questions instead of assume. So, some questions that you can ask to anchor yourself in the situation and understand fully what's going on is, what's actually going on for you right now? What feels most challenging about this? What do you feel clear on and where are you stuck? What do you need in order to move forward? And when you ask these questions, listen to understand, listen for their emotional state and their capacity and readiness to be able to move forward. If you skip this step, you are guessing at the starting point. And this happens so often. You think you know where someone is and you don't because you didn't ask questions. Step two is to separate your lens from their reality. Catch the instinct to say, if this were me, this is what I would do. That is your lens. It is not their location. Replace it with that curiosity driven understanding. Your job is to see clearly, not to project. Step three is to set the destination clearly. Once you understand what is going on, what their emotional state is, you have seen the situation clearly. Now you need to be explicit with your expectations and your standards. Do not lower the bar because the starting point is different than what you thought or that they want that validation from you. Remember that clarity is kindness. Clarity creates safety, even when it is hard. Be crystal clear about what the expectations are, what needs to happen going forward, and how you are going to help this person in this situation. Step four is calibrate the route. And what I mean by that is that you need to agree on what the path forward is. You understand the situation because you were curious. You have separated your lens from their reality. You have set the destination clearly. Then talk about how you're going to get there. That's calibrating the route. Okay, this is the plan to address this performance issue. This is the plan to help yourself get out of this very emotional situation. Whatever is going on, make sure that you calibrate the route. This is the plan. This is what helps people get to where they're going. If you just say, okay, this is a problem, now you go figure out how to fix it, a lot of times people, especially if they're in a low level of health or an emotional state or struggling with something, they don't know how to get there. So help them calibrate that route. Understand here's where your starting point is, here's the destination, this is the path to get there. Give them autonomy to be able to create that. That is what you need to do to set clear expectations. Then there's step number five, which is recalculate in real time. People do not move in straight lines. There are very few things that are linear in life, with the exception of perhaps a linear math problem. And humans are not that. Let's face it, we are all over the place. I mean, we often say that statement, one step forward, two steps back. That is so true. And it's even, I think, messier. Like we literally are going up, down, reverse, back in circles. Humans are messy. We are not going to go on that route in a straight path as we're trying to improve ourselves. We're trying to fix a performance issue while we're trying to deal with something tough in our life. To recalculate in real time, you have to stay in dialogue. You need to stay connected to that person. Continue asking questions, checking in with them, adjusting what's going on. If the plan that you set in place is not working, sometimes you have to adjust. Remember, a good GPS recalculates without losing the destination. That is what good leadership does. And then finally, step six, hold movement as the expectation. You are not here to sit at the starting point. And trust me, some people will. They want to wallow in whatever is going on. And that is just not acceptable. In a business and in life, we have to move forward. Progress is required. Set that expectation. So then your question becomes, are we moving? And yes, you might have to go back to step five where you're recalculating in real time because it is left and right and up and down and all over the place. But are we moving? Are we making progress? So now I want to circle back and have an ownership moment because I didn't get this situation right with my employee. I assumed that when he didn't say anything that he was in agreement with me, right? That silence meant agreement and he didn't agree with me and he just wasn't saying that. When I pushed him to solve the problem, to see the problem through my lens, my way, it didn't land because I didn't offer him enough space to share how he was really feeling. I didn't understand his starting point. So silence meant agreement. Nope. I assumed that he would just logically see that the way that I would handle it was the best way for him to handle it. And that totally missed the point because he does not have my worldview and it didn't land with him. And it wasn't the way that he would solve a problem. And I moved fast. I didn't truly understand what was going on. I didn't ask enough questions. And so I pushed hard. And that pushing hard was not received well. So, what did I change going forward? Now, whenever I get into these situations where it's a hard conversation, I always start with curiosity. I don't make assumptions. I don't assume that the person sees it the way that I do. I adjust my communication based on what that person can actually receive in the moment. I did this recently with some tough feedback that I had to give. I gave the feedback. I wanted to continue to talk about it. I could tell this person was really emotional and needed to have some time to process. And so instead of pushing it my way to continue to talk about it, I said, "Do you need some time to process?" And this person said, "Yes." And I said, "No problem. Let's just circle back tomorrow." And I could see that that is what they needed in the moment. That is how you adjust your communication style based on what that person could receive. This person could not receive any more feedback in that moment. It was like fight or flight at that point, and there needed to be some space. And I gave that space, and they came back the next day and we resolved the issue. Going back to this GPS metaphor, I still hold that destination and I'm okay with recalibrating the route. I'm okay with people having to be messy along their journey. It's okay. Let's just always remember this is where we're trying to get to. This is the endpoint, better performance, getting through this situation, building a relationship, whatever it is that this person is struggling with. Here's the final destination, but we might have to recalibrate along the way, and that is okay. Because here's the leadership truth. It is your responsibility to translate the standard that you have, the expectations that you have, in a way that each person can receive. That is meeting someone where they are. So, as we wrap up this podcast, what are the key takeaways? Number one, meeting people where they are starts with curiosity, not assumption. Number two, diagnosing the situation without inquiring what's going on, without asking questions, is projecting. You are projecting your assumptions, your beliefs, your lens onto that person, and that is never going to go well. Number three, empathy without accountability creates stagnation. Accountability without empathy creates disconnection. Both are required to move forward effectively while building trust and building the relationship. Number four, the destination is the expectation that you have, but the route getting there, it's okay if that changes. In fact, it probably will. Be comfortable with that. Lean into that. And finally, number five, great leaders do not lower the bar in situations like this. They get better at helping people reach it. With that, I leave you for your day. I hope you enjoyed this podcast episode. If you feel that someone could benefit from understanding what meeting people where they are means and how to do it better, please feel free to share this with them. And if you like this episode, please go over to YouTube or your favorite podcast platform and subscribe to it. And please share it. And if you like this podcast, please go over to YouTube or your favorite podcast platform and subscribe to it. Like it, write a review, rate it, share it with a friend. It helps with the algorithms and gets the podcast out further, which I always appreciate your help with. Thank you so much. Have a great day, and we will see you next week.